Hey everybody, and welcome to Q&A video number 61. Make sure to keep asking questions. Doesn't matter they're about. They can be about anything. Just know I do not respond to review requests or Let's Play requests in these videos, but I will respond to them in the comments. Once again, those are what do you think about insert game here. That's a review request. If you want to ask me about a specific feature of a game or something that's surrounding it in the news, maybe something the publisher did or something like that, then feel free to do so. But the simple what do you think about this game is not going to get answered in a Q&A. Gameplay in the background is of the original Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six, partly because I'm just happy to get it recording again, and partly because it really does tie into this first question that I have from the Leninist Plays Games. What is your opinion on the so-called Braindead AI in games like Quake, Doom, or Serious Sam, old school shooters in general? I'm kind of the opinion that AI that takes cover and acts in a more realistic and tactical manner should be reserved for more realistic and tactical games. Here's the thing about that so-called Braindead AI. It's really a couple of things. First off, limitations of the technology at the time. AI programming was just not there in the 90s, and so you had some pretty limited things that you could actually do with it. Even with those limitations, they were able to do some pretty interesting things. For example, the fact that monsters of different kinds in, say, Doom, for example, and this was something that carried on into, of course, the Quake games as well, where monsters that hit each other will actually start attacking each other in retaliation. Or the thing where in Quake 2 in particular, certain enemies will actually duck under certain attacks. So say you launch a rocket at them, they'll actually duck under the rocket, and you have to learn to anticipate that sort of thing. It's actually kind of an interesting AI quirk, and as far as it being so-called brain dead, it works fine in these particular situations because they compensate for that by making the enemies do a lot of damage, by giving them certain attacks that you have to react to differently. For example, some might throw grenades at you, some might have a combination of multiple attacks that they can do, some of them fly, all sorts of things like that, and they throw them all at you at once. In the case of something like Serious Sam, yes, the AI pretty much is brain dead. They just charge right at you and not much else. But here's the thing, they compensate for that by sheer numbers, and so the game ends up actually being legitimately hard as a result. As long as the game is still challenging, it's fine if it's brain-dead AI. But then you have games like, say, zombie games, where the AI is brain-dead and the game is not remotely challenging, because not only is it stupid AI, but it's zombies. They're never going to be a particularly tough enemy. Let's just face it. Now, for a more tactical or realistic game like Rainbow Six, yes, a more realistic tactical AI system is going to be a must. Now, then you have something like the original Rainbow Six on up through, frankly, Rainbow Six 3. The AI is not very good in those games, but that doesn't matter, because it's really accurate, and it's really fast to react. So that's what keeps you on your toes in the old school Rainbow Six games. You really do have to plan things out and work accordingly. And that's what makes those games challenging. In fact, the only games I can think of off the top of my head that had legitimately challenging AI by nature of it being tactical minded were Fear, at least the original, because the sequels didn't have particularly great AI, and the original Far Cry. Although, frankly, nothing has ever surpassed Fear as far as I can tell. The closest they've come to it is being slightly weaker than the original Fear, but the AI in Fear is frickin' fantastic. It is basically the best AI we've ever seen, and for some reason they haven't been able to replicate it since. Even Monolith couldn't. So, it's actually kind of an interesting thing to go off on the Fear AI in and of itself. It's actually a really fascinating topic, but it requires a lot of computing knowledge to really wrap your head around, so I won't go into particulars there, but that sort of AI is much more important in a realistic or tactical game. And then you have things like the new Rainbow Six, which unfortunately I didn't have any extra footage for, which is why I'm not showing Rainbow Six Siege beta instead of this original Rainbow Six AI. But in Rainbow Six Siege, the AI for the terrorist hunt mode is actually incredibly stupid. They're just really accurate, and that's the only reason that realistic mode is actually even the slightest bit challenging. On normal mode, it's way too easy. On hard, it's just you can still do it solo, no problem. When you get to realistic, even with a full team, you're probably going to lose, and it's not because the AI is outsmarting you, it's because it's dumb and will actually kind of rush you. and get pinpoint accurate shots in every single time. That's the only reason that Rainbow Six Siege's AI is remotely challenging. That sort of thing is cheap, and it feels cheap. So that's kind of the point I need to make with this. AI is fine either way, whether it's really dumb or really smart, as long as the game works around it, as long as the AI is conducive toward or not a hindrance toward the challenge of the game, the thing that actually keeps you interested, then it'll work. So people complaining about old school shooters having dumb AI are kind of missing the point, because those games are still challenging anyway, and still fun to this day. Next question is from a name that's really hard to pronounce, so I'm just going to try. Acetyl Slickelsyra, I guess? I'm not entirely sure. You feel free to correct me on that. I guess you play too many games to be able to bother with them much, but what are your opinions of achievements? How should a good achievement be designed? Well, I find that the achievements you get when you just complete basic story content, like completing missions, or simply getting through a certain part of the game, are really lazy and really not much in the way of achievements. The ones that really interest me are the ones you kind of have to go out of your way to get. Now, you'll see games like, say, Civilization 5, which gives you an achievement for completing the game with every single faction. It also gives you achievements for winning the game as every single faction on deity difficulty, which is actually really hard to do. It gives you tons of achievements for very, very specific things, and those are the kind that really interest me. Things like doing things you would probably normally do during gameplay anyway, but it's just an interesting circumstance, like rushing a wonder with a great engineer as Egypt. You don't think of doing stuff like that. You just kind of do it, and it happens, and you're like, wait, why did this happen? Oh, that's kind of interesting. Those are kind of interesting if you're going to throw a lot of achievements into the game. If you're not going to have that many achievements, make them things you really do have to go out of your way to get, because those will be the most interesting ones. They'll allow you to explore different parts of the game than people normally would. And that's ultimately what an achievement should do. It should encourage you to just go beyond the basic playthrough, sort of as rewards for people who are going to go back and play through the thing again in a different way. So that's the kind of thing that I find most interesting with achievements. I don't normally go for them very much, and if I do, it's because it's something that's just kind of something I'm going toward anyway. For example, if I wanted to play through Civilization 5 as Egypt, I'll probably get the Russia Wonder achievement anyway. But it's just kind of a nice little thing to keep you going along and be like, oh, well, I'm going to try something a bit different than I normally do, and then I'll get this achievement and such and so forth. Next one is from the Gaming Patriot. What do you think of mobile gaming and how it's the preferred platform for kids aged 2 to 17? Do you believe that when Generation Y has kids, there will be a shift to PC gaming yet again? I cannot hope to predict PC gaming trends. I really can't. We are seeing a shift back toward PC gaming simply because of games like Dota and League of Legends and Counter-Strike becoming so popular again. But other than that, you're not really seeing a huge shift back toward PC because it has a really high cost barrier. To get a good gaming PC, you're going to spend probably around $800 to $1,000, and that's just for a good gaming PC for its time. If you want the really high-end stuff, you have to go higher than that. And compare that to consoles, where it's a cost of about $400 to $500 for the system itself, and then you just have to buy the games. And I mean, you can just plug your console right up to your TV and you're good to go, whereas on PC you're going to need peripherals and everything. So again, high setup cost makes it not as accessible as other forms of gaming. But then there's mobile, which pretty much everybody now has a cell phone, and particularly a smartphone, and so it's just widely available. That's partly why it's so popular. It's just because, well, if you're going to play a mobile game, it's going to be something really casual, it's going to be really quick to play, really easy to get into, and it's probably going to have a lot of very highly addictive elements. Now, I have never played a single mobile game that I actually liked, but they all had this simplicity about them that made it really easy to just pick them up and play them without having any prior experience with the entire genre, really. And so, what I found while playing these things was that it kind of incentivizes addiction. Now, not all of them are like this. Some of them are, but not all of them. And that's what kind of bothers me about targeting that specific age group with mobile gaming, because these are not exactly people who earn their own wage. I mean, if you are of the legal age to work in your state, for example, then you might be able to get some extra cash and be able to pay for things yourself. But by and large, you're going to have to go to your parents in order to actually be able to afford anything in the game. And this age group is not exactly the most, shall we say, patient. And a lot of these mobile games just rely on that impatience factor. And that's what bothers me the most about it. It can be really exploitative, not just for that particular age group, but for really anyone who is playing a mobile game. And so what ends up happening is you're going to find that these people are going to spend a lot of money that they don't even understand on mobile games, and then it comes back to bite them later. And you do actually see this on occasion in the news, where somebody would spend over $1,000 or something on various microtransactions in a mobile game because they didn't know any better. And that sort of thing is frankly disgusting. And as a side note, it really amuses me and saddens me that you have people growing up these days who actually don't learn how to type properly. And thus you have a lot of people who can't type worth a damn. And it really does hurt when you're trying to read this stuff. Now, if you'll permit me to turn into Old Man DW here. In my day, we had to type our commands into the computer using a keyboard. We didn't have these fancy, schmancy touch screens and everything. So skills are being lost, unfortunately, and it's probably going to come back to bite us later when we're going to run into situations where there aren't enough programmers later on. I mean, they're pretty much a dime a dozen now, but eventually we might run into situations where people can't program because they don't know how to type properly and things like that. So we'll have to just wait and see where that goes, but I don't like the trend right now, and I hope that we get back to a good balance of things instead of it just completely dominating the market and bleeding over into our mainstream gaming. Next one is from Andre Gamer for Life, and I believe I've answered this before, but I can't remember which Q&A it was in, so here we go. Are you an atheist? No, I am not an atheist. I am also not religious. In fact, I believe that organized religion is a plague upon this earth, and that is regardless of what religion it is. I believe they are all a plague upon this earth that people use as excuses to just fight and kill each other and not much else anymore. Humanity passed the point of so-called needing religion many, many, many years ago. Hundreds of years ago, in fact. And yet, the fact that we still cling to them is really a sign of how backwards we are in a lot of ways. Not only that, but the fact that we're having so many problems with religion-centric discrimination these days really does speak volumes to me. But as for being an atheist, I actually don't have enough faith for that, believe it or not. I do believe that there is a sort of cosmic force, I guess you can call it God. You can also call it the Grand Architect or whatever you want to call it. It's basically a deist construct. If you've never heard of deism, it was a belief system that was popular around the Enlightenment era, and a lot of the founding fathers were actually part of the movement, but I'm not really fully in line with this kind of stuff. But the basic idea is that instead of being highly religious people like would have been before, they believe that a sort of cosmic entity set everything in motion and then just left it to be. Just left life to continue on. So evolution did its part, and thus we have our current situation. And that's pretty much what I believe, although I don't ascribe to any of the more religious ideas that go along with deism. I just kind of believe in a grand cosmic force that set everything in motion. Once again, you can call it God, and that's pretty much it. So whether you want to call that agnosticism or Gnosticism or whatever you want to call it, it's not atheism, I can tell you that. In fact, atheists piss me off, because they tend to be some of the most obnoxious people I have ever run into. Plenty of them are perfectly fine, don't get me wrong, but I don't know what it is with atheists about being just as confrontational as evangelical Christians, for example. It actually bothers me. But, oh well. Let's move on to the last question for this Q&A, which is from Fat Freddy. I just read an article in which it was argued that the games industry will crash again. The reason would be the oversaturation of the indie game market. Do you have that feeling too, and do you mind if it would happen? Probably not going to hit another big game crash, because there are safeguards in place to prevent that kind of a catastrophic failure anymore. What we would probably run into is more of what I would like to call a culling of the herd. Right now, we have a ridiculous oversaturation in the indie market. That is very clear. It's fine to have a lot of indie developers, don't get me wrong. But when they're all doing basically the exact same damn thing over and over and over again, cough puzzle platformers, cough, then you're going to run into issues where people aren't going to care anymore. I'm one of those people. I literally cannot bring myself to play puzzle platformers anymore because I just got so tired of them. They were just constantly coming out and popping up in my inbox and getting in these various humble bundles and all that sort of thing. So they just take up space in my Steam library, and I'm probably never going to get around to playing them because I just get bored with them so incredibly easily. And the market is completely full of this stuff. Another problem is that a lot of the indie market is full of complete garbage, frankly. There are some really great indie developers out there, don't get me wrong. People like Wajidai Games, people like Vlambeer, Supergiant, Lucas Pope, any number of these really fantastic indie developers out there who put out really great products that are different from what you see normally. And yet, you're seeing just tons of copycats and such like that. It's become a matter of monkey see, monkey do. And really, that's not a good way of having your games industry going. So what's probably going to happen, if we ever do hit a point where there's a sort of crash, you're going to see a lot of these indie developers who are just shoveling out the same old thing over and over and over again that nobody is really interested in. For example, puzzle platformers, just non-stop puzzle platformers, that's all they do. Well, guess what? They're probably going to shut down eventually. For example, half of what I see in Indie Gala bundles and Groupies bundles and things like that, just these games that nobody has ever heard of and probably nobody ever will, and that nobody's going to bother playing, partly because there's no marketing for them, but partly because we've seen the same thing done hundreds of times, and we're just sick of it. And what would end up needing to happen is adapt or perish. Either the studios adapt and put out better products or things that are more interesting, things that are stuff we don't normally see, such like that, or they just shut down because they can't get enough revenue. It's kind of a sad and harsh reality, but it pretty much needs to happen. That's how capitalism works. Ideally, anyway. That was Q&A 61. Make sure to keep asking questions, and I will catch you guys in later videos.